When I was very young, Star Wars mania was still going strong. The prequels were nearing completion. Toys, blasters, and fold-out lightsabers were flying off the shelves. But most importantly, Star Wars was producing video games like no licensed franchise had before. Perhaps no time in the Star Wars timeline is better suited for gamification than the early moments of the Clone Wars. The original films have stormtroopers and AT-ATs. We could learn to wield a lightsaber. We could pilot an X-Wing. These were all widely interesting and accessible concepts. However, the realm of possibilities that the Clone Wars opened up was unlike any other. I imagine that if you had managed to interview the excitable children of the time, they'd tell you that the video game market needed more Call of Duties, more Halos, guns blasting, grenades booming, explosions, and guts everywhere. That's where gaming could have easily been heading. Unbeknownst to these ambitious younglings, that's exactly what the Western game market would be seeing very soon. So, after Attack of the Clones released in 2002, what came next kinda seemed obvious. The Clone Wars were sitting there exceptionally ripe for the picking. Lightning in a bottle. Perfect time, perfect place, perfect level of competent first-person shooter capabilities. Get dug in, trooper. I'm the hairiest hair, and I'll be your CO during this mission. Our first glimpse into the Star Wars universe begins not in the cockpit of a space fighter, nor under the glorious glow of a lightsaber. We start our journey deep in the trenches alongside the common clone trooper in 2005's Republic Commando. Let's lay down some groundwork for the non-nerds outside the range of Star Wars' influence. I'm gonna be as brief as possible. Star Wars is a series of films that tell the overarching story of a farm boy who turns hero. A wide galaxy of alien species, humans, and everything in between lives under the iron fist of an oppressive empire. With enough pressure applied, the people rebel, toppling the empire and emotionally growing along the way. Its most iconic staples are the lightsabers, stormtroopers, Darth Vader, Yoda, copious amounts of iconic vehicles, and, of course, the Force. These movies are from the 70s. What they lack in special effects, they make up for in an undeniable charm and whimsy that no other film series has ever managed to capture. Their set design is both futuristic and trashy. The weaponry and armor designs remain memorable. Above all, who amongst us creative children hasn't held onto the hope that the Force is real and we're one of the lucky ones that can move a Capri Sun with our minds? Jump ahead several years with the release of the 1999 classic The Phantom Menace, a prequel to help overcomplicate a simple story, eventually receiving its own couple of inevitable sequels. The prequel trilogy muddies the water to a considerable degree, but what it provides in vibes is the real game changer. Story-wise, we focus on a democratic republic tag teaming with their peacekeeping monks as political issues bubble to the surface. Disputes cause a clash between the established republic and the up-and-coming, clearly and overtly evil separatists. The separatists turn the disputes into war when they bust out an army of droids and begin taking over the galaxy one planet at a time. One of the peacekeepers, a Jedi, goes on an investigative mission where he discovers that someone put in a massive order of soldiers for the Republic, all of them clones of one particular bad butt bounty hunter. Out of desperation and despite not placing the order themselves, the Republic accept the clone trooper assistance. Now, each side has their seemingly infinite pawns to sacrifice. Republic clones versus separatist droids, two sides fighting a war through proxies. Oh, and also, there's a really bad backstory for Darth Vader going on in there somewhere. Star Wars is mostly recognized as a staple in our modern time due to both the cultural impact of the prequels as well as the classic long-lasting nature of the tales told in the original films. For the sake of today's video, all that matters is the prequels. Look only at the political proxy wars and ask yourself, what would it be like? What kind of adventures would we find ourselves in were we a born and bred soldier fighting the good fight on the ground level? Well, fret not, pets. After Star Wars introduced its clone trooper characters in their debut motion picture, Lucasfilm spared no expense in pushing their image out into the world. At first, the promotional material tried to keep them in the background. These posters in the movie's title, Attack of the Clones, imply that the clones would be pitted against the Jedi. But once the swerve was complete and the clones were marked as one of the good guys, marketing, action figures, and gratuitously sexy shots of the white-clad nameless soldiers forced them into the public eye. If anything was going to move both future movie tickets and lucrative products, it was these guys. With this ambitious clone trooper campaign came games aplenty. Today's subject, Republic Commando, is a first-person shooter in the vein of Halo, or, well, mostly Halo. It looks like Halo, it shoots like Halo, it must be Halo. This particular version of Halo is a short tale in the Star Wars universe, focusing on a squad of clones as they navigate their debut battlefield, and then get shipped off to harder assignments down the line. Short, memorable, and fuming with an undeniable gamer stink. Released for both PC and the original Xbox, Republic Commando may seem like another forgettable piece of licensed nonsense, but it somehow manages to squeak out enough charm at every turn that its widespread fan base feels only natural. Being created in an era of gaming ripe with nostalgia will certainly carry a game far in terms of reputation, but making a game that's exceedingly fun, competent, and respectful to the Star Wars universe is what has carried this game far beyond its years. If you're paying attention to the video, you may notice a discrepancy in the footage. That is because I am having to bounce between footage from the PC version as well as the original Xbox version, playable thanks to Xbox One's backwards compatibility. I wish I could claim I did this for completionist's sake, that I could say I performed above and beyond for journalistic purposes. Sadly, that is not the case. Republic Commando isn't the most aged in its graphics or its gameplay, but it is undoubtedly old. Its oldness can be best observed by the fact that the PC version has some bizarre crashing problems. Usually when I encounter an issue like this, I find someone online with a similar experience and discover that they've already found a surefire way to fix it. With Republic Commando, things were not so simple. When looking up crash on the Steam forums, there are loads of entries. Typically this is good because someone at some point probably found a temporary solution. The bad news is that each one of these entries describes their crash as happening somewhere completely different in the game. I don't just mean different from me, I mean different from each other. Some talk about crashing upon starting a new game, others say it's a specific level. Some can't even get the game to boot at all. It's an older game, this stuff happens. Not something I'm all too bothered by, except that I'm making a video on this, and the crash happens for me upon trying to load the final planet of Kashyyyk. I've had it happen at the beginning of the level. I've had it happen mid-fight. I've had it happen on the menu. I don't have footage of these crashes because I'm not talking about the game closing itself after not responding. I'm talking about a gray screen consuming both my monitors and my computer becoming completely unresponsive. This forces me to restart the computer and lose the footage. I tried a few fixes and they didn't help any. For a moment, I almost feared the worst. Then I remembered the Xbox version exists and realized the opportunity I had been presented. So let's talk about the Xbox version. On the PC, with the graphics turned up, the game looks phenomenal. I got nothing to complain about with the visuals. But on the Xbox, well, it's a jarring difference. Textures are lower in fidelity, the chunkiness of the polygons are much more visible, and the bloom effects that really felt like a defining feature of this game are completely removed. Most obvious in the first cutscene, the clone children are just missing their eyes, and there's nothing to cover that up. But after the initial shock wears off, it's still a rock-solid experience. The gunplay is perfectly competent, the button mapping is extremely comfortable, and even giving commands to the troopers is more manageable on controller than it is on keyboard. I was so often shocked by just how much I was enjoying the console experience, considering that most first-person shooters play better with a mouse. However, the aim assist makes aiming feel reliable without being easy. I still have to put in work to get the shot, but when it's time to panic fire, I'm probably gonna hit something. That being said, there are a few enemies that I could not hit reliably. The flying Geonosian leaders move erratically, and the sensitivity I had to turn my controller up to made it very difficult to line up a shot before they flew off somewhere else. In these instances, I had to rely on my commandos to assist in their destruction, but even then, just trying to look at the enemy and highlight them for focus fire was something I struggled to do. The Xbox version was difficult in many ways, frustrating in others, but if it's your only option to play this game, it's still a good one. The backwards compatible version of the game staggers and hiccups when saving a checkpoint, but otherwise performed with perfect competence, giving me a console experience that really helped me travel back to a time I missed out on. Good or bad, I couldn't get any PC footage of Kashyyyk for this video, and trust me, no one is more brokenhearted than me. So please forgive and forget that discrepancy, and we'll just chalk this up as a worthwhile learning experience. As you can imagine, a shoot-bang video game starring genetically identical soldiers isn't going to be the most narratively complex thing in the world. However, Star Wars is probably its strongest when it's at its simplest. Republic Commando is a perfect embodiment of that jarhead simplicity. Go to a place, get some orders, shoot some things. That's mostly the whole game. Most levels are more so an excuse to explore places we briefly visit in the films. The Battle of Geonosis is the clone troopers' debut, and certainly the most sensible location to start our story in. After touching down and fighting in the familiar desert, we make our way into a droid factory, another concept introduced in Attack of the Clones. Successfully sabotaging it allows us to move on to a core ship, those giant ball things we barely get a view of in the film. When you look at Star Wars from a modern perspective, it's easy to view it with a sort of exhausted saturation. But at this point in our timeline, Star Wars was a theater experience first, blockbuster rental second, and that gave it a loving distance that could be seized. By having this sort of familiar location, players can latch on without feeling any sort of alienation. It's the places they know, the battle they barely got to see. It captures both a sort of familiar comfort and an uncertain excitement. Almost immediately after Geonosis, we move on to a Republic assault ship that's gone dark. After having disappeared for a while, the cruiser has suddenly reappeared. A lack of communication has Command worried enough to send our squad in. When we arrive, it's cold, empty, completely still. The further we go, the more gruesome the reality is. Having a Republic attack cruiser as your second location is a beautiful escalation of settings. It's somewhere that, at the time the game came out, we had yet to see on screen. So, it's escalating beyond familiar territory and instead capturing a curiosity. Narratively, our clones are returning home, but home has changed. Invaded, the ship puts our competent soldiers on the back foot and increases the difficulty by a considerable degree, taking the game from a wish fulfillment to a nightmare scenario. The final chapter takes place on Kashyyyk, at the time still pronounced Kashyyyk. It's kind of wild how often the Star Wars video games take us to Kashyyyk, considering that the original trilogy never showed the Wookiees' homeworld. Well, not outside of the beloved Star Wars holiday special. We wouldn't get a proper look at it until episode 3, which, again, wasn't in theaters until a couple months after this game. So, for a lucky many, this may have been the introduction to this forested land. One more time, Republic Commando takes us away from what we know and throws us somewhere new. Never willing to leave us stranded, however, it doesn't pull into straight fan fiction territory. They smartly play with the elements that already exist and come out on top through creativity. That being said, Kashyyyk and Republic Commando does have a flavor to it that I don't recall ever seeing anywhere else. Kashyyyk, despite being visited often in Star Wars supplementary material, is a place that we mostly skirt around on the edges of. Its deep forests and populated communities are kept from us, for the most part. Republic Commando goes an interesting route by taking us into the cities. We see a destroyed bazaar with displayed signs, a sight I would have never imagined. We see hangars made for their ships. We see their anti-aircraft battlements. There's even a section where we pass through a nursery for their larger tree saplings. This game went above and beyond in many ways. It's kind of wild to think that I've never seen Kashyyyk depicted this way ever before or after, especially because this game made me consider that Wookiee culture might be more interesting than I've ever stopped to ponder on before. Geonosis, a Republic cruiser, and Kashyyyk. That's all three settings this game has to offer. Across the trio, we're mostly meant to believe that our commandos are being shipped off from one difficult battlefield to the next. The three that we see are only a glimpse of some larger storyline. Our boys are haggard, tired, and run ragged by the game's end. Despite all this, what really is the story that Republic Commando is trying to tell?
Well, if I'm honest with you, I don't really know.
Republic Commando is made with a different style of headspace than video games of today. Rather than having a motivating purpose for our characters, they're grunts. Elite grunts, but still grunts. Hopping from one explosion to another is pretty much the entire goal. And it's not until Republic Commando's closing moments that we start to see the seeds planted for some kind of evolution in the Commando's thinking. It's unfortunate, but I'd be willing to wager that it's the nature of being a game stuck in between the most pivotal moments in the prequel's timeline. The clones arrive in episode 2, and a few months after this game ships, they will betray the galaxy. That story can't be told here without spoiling a part of the film, so we have to stick to the basics. Or, maybe more likely, the game wasn't meant to be crafted with a narrative at all. The clones give us the opportunity to blast through interesting environments with cool weapons, shooting an assortment of enemies. With all of that, you've got a video game, no more thought necessary. And that's not me being insulting, that's just how a video game is made sometimes. Gameplay first, narrative dead last. Republic Commando mostly feels like it exists somewhere in between. Its level of progression from one setting to the next feels like it makes cohesive sense. Every new objective is informed by the previous. It's rare that we are doing something completely out of left field. It's a well-crafted experience from beginning to end with a pace that feels comforting and agreeable. However, it's the way this game ends that makes me think, there was something there. There really could have been something there, only for it to slam to credits abruptly. This game legitimately ends right as the plot begins to form and get interesting, and I'm willing to bet that that one detail is one of the biggest reasons why Republic Commando has a fan base that is still holding on with hope 20 years later. But I'll get into that later. First, let's meet the lads. Republic Commando very proudly attempts to ground its perspective of the Star Wars universe. If the films are from the flighty and invincible perspective of the Jedi, Republic Commando asks what this conflict looks like through the eyes of the expendable forces of the clones. From moment one, you're shown the visions of clone children as they accelerate through their aging process and rapidly transform into the war machines they were made to be. Though it's skipped over rather quickly, these images serve well to remind the player their place in this world. It's gritty, depressing in some regards, yet most vitally, it conveys to you the mindset of a born and bred soldier. After the second movie, which introduced our white-clad soldiers, clones were considered mostly faceless and expendable. As we neared the third entry in the prequels, clones got more and more characterized. In this game, maybe more than in any adaptation ever, the commandos are crafted with such immense sass and badassness. Look at how hard these poses go. Look at how rugged the squad is. While many clone-related projects would exist after this point, they rarely reach the levels of posted-up drip lords that Republic Commando attempted to embody both in concept art and in execution. From the jump to its conclusion, the Commandos and Delta Squad linger with this air of cool surrounding them. The animation team went through a brief special ops training to ensure they could capture both the effectiveness and cooperation of a highly trained team of soldiers when performing actions such as breaching rooms. And while they certainly don't keep that same level of cool when an enemy just walks up and keeps blasting them in the face at point-blank range, the amount of detail put into the squad and their movements is enough to convince me of their competency at the best of times. George Lucas himself, allegedly, made the suggestion that our soldiers be color-coded, giving them more distinctiveness and personalities. At a glance, they can be recognized, and their unique armor style, still wildly underutilized in the expanded universe, sets them apart from any other member of the Republic's army. Beyond their looks, each soldier is voiced differently, casting aside the clone trooper image in favor of something far more memorable and unique. Every effort spared to make these lads the best they could possibly be. Star Wars canon be damned. In this game, we take control of Delta 3-8, also known as Boss. Voiced by Temura Morrison, the original Jango Fett clone trooper, 3-8 embodies the ideal clone, sounding cool, giving orders, and occasionally putting some stank on it.
Let's rearrange some architecture, Deltas.
Setting demo.
He has lines that joke about, barks that playfully toy with his teammates, and while he's the default, that doesn't make him boring. Second in command is Delta 4-0, Fixer. He's calculated, by the books, fairly simple in terms of characterization.
Just like the simulator.
Introduced as the guy to press the buttons and solve the problems. He gets the order done and doesn't ask questions. Every team needs their guy who pushes up on their glasses, raises a finger and says, actually. Fixer is our guy, but he's cool about it, you know? On the flip side of that is Delta 6-2, nicknamed Scorch. He's the funny guy, the Michelangelo of the group, orange paint job and all. In his introduction, Scorch is eager to plant a detonation charge, further established by being a little too overjoyed at the sound of the ensuing explosion. He brings the lightheartedness to an otherwise gritty cast, and his vocal performance makes him feel less like the crew's clown and more like what he is, the relief.
So let me get this straight. The Trandos have stolen this ship to give to the Separatists, To buy battle droids?
Lastly, the grizzled killer of the squad, 07, or more commonly known as Sev. He's a rugged hardball with a deeper growl to his voice. Usually this kind of character is the heavy weapons guy, but Sev is more so established as a sniper. Despite that, he's still unafraid to get close and personal. 07 is at his best when bouncing off of Scorch, one being a goofy sense of humor, and the other being a more serious, dry humor. As the missions progress, you see and hear a bond between the two that seems unexpected, but feels so right.
Disabling maneuvers.
Blowing things up?
Oh, I knew that.
Perhaps maybe more important than the way the game paints the commandos, we should focus on more of how the game actually operates, because the concept is certainly very different in execution. I spent many years in fear of playing this game. I was worried that the inevitable may occur. Boot it up, get hands on it, be disappointed. At the time of release, a lot of first-person console games were blossoming, and if you weren't one of the big dog developers, you probably had a considerable amount of jank to work through. That's not to claim that any of these games were bad, just that going back to them after modern controls have been so standardized can be immensely jarring. After so long of desiring this game, I eventually found myself the proud owner of its PC Steam release. Yet still, I couldn't bring myself to boot it up. Living in fear, I let it exist in my library, collecting digital dust particles. Years and years passed. I allowed Republic Commando to exist in my mind as this beautiful piece of art that I had only gotten a glimpse of, and I found myself content with that for some time, just being this distant fan. However, my curiosity wouldn't allow me such comfort for too long. The day finally came. I needed to know. I grit my teeth and found that, actually, it plays remarkably well. In the game of Republic Commando, the primary gimmick is that we are dealing with a squad-based first-person shooter. The inspiration behind both Republic Commando's gameplay and its tones comes from titles such as Rainbow Six and Ghost Recon. While the tone fits shockingly well in the Star Wars universe, what about the gunplay? The actual moment-to-moment gameplay is nice and simplified. Were you to ignore your squad, it would be even simpler. When micromanaging your team's every move, it can feel like piloting a mech as you play Twister with your keyboard fingers. Occasionally, I brought my mouse hand all the way over to hit one of the function keys. I genuinely don't think I've ever done that in any PC game before this one. Despite how that sounds, Republic Commando is mostly stripped down to its simplest parts. The commands you can give your troopers are rather basic. The first one is to go in aggressive, the offensive formation, labeled as search and destroy. Tell them this and they'll pretty much head in the direction of the plot. The second is form up, requesting everyone to come to your location and stick close. The third is to secure a specific position, allowing you to carefully dictate where your team stands. The last command cancels all previous orders, extremely useful after purposefully gathering your posse and setting them up in strategic positions that are no longer viable. These commands, as you can imagine, have room for failure. Sometimes forming up takes a second too long and someone gets left behind. Occasionally, when you tell your team to defend a position, you are commanding them to stand in a circle of death. And if I'm being honest, I didn't notice too much of a difference when calling for offensive formations. You could easily play through this game with them in their default state, and I'd imagine you'd find the credits without too much hassle. On the field of battle, these commands are how you control the state of your team, positioning them in and out of danger, giving them the advantage in tense situations. In actual practice, however, the majority of this game is your team being swarmed from many different sides. Commands are useful and your team is far from worthless, but I don't know that I ever felt like these were the difference makers between life and death. That feeling was only furthered when I took a long enough break from playing the game that I completely forgot about the command functions. Playing this game without giving the commandos orders is extremely basic and mind-numbing, but it's not any more difficult or easy, I don't think. Squad-based shooters seem fairly plagued with this issue across the board, and Republic Commando doesn't fix that. Despite this, there is still one more command, the mightiest of all, the context-sensitive command prompt. This is, quite genuinely, Republic Commando's bread and butter. You shoot, you get shot, you tell your boys to do a specific thing. These specific things range from setting a bomb to mounting a turret. The majority of these actions have a timer, an amount of real-life seconds you must cover your lad's back while he sets up or performs the actions. As an example, if it's a bomb, it has a 10-second setup period. In these 10 seconds, the clone is vulnerable, unable to fight back and unable to defend. Should they get hit, don't worry about an annoying reset of progress. There is no consequence other than loss of health. Once they have completed the task, the bomb is set. Now, you must look at it and press that beloved context button to detonate the charge. This is primarily the action you will be experiencing throughout Republic Commando. However, the context-sensitive button does get more interesting than just waiting on a timer. There are cover positions, spots that would be excellent for a sniper to set up and pick incoming enemies off from afar. Setting your trooper there will have them switch to their sniper attachment and start making a major dent in the swarms heading your way. The downside being that once they are overwhelmed, they are in deep trouble, unable to move until you relinquish them. A different type of cover, dictated only by a change in symbols, can be used for anti-armor and grenade chucking. Again, having similar strengths and similar drawbacks. Turrets give a crazy advantage in a battle, their downside once again being quite obvious. Unlimited power, itty-bitty living space. When listed out like that, I guess they do sound rather limited. Another game where you're just making the same choices over and over with only the flavor changing subtly. But I promise that in actual gameplay, it can feel a lot less like that. The constant strategic positioning and awareness you will need to possess to manage the chaos is anything but simple. One reason being that after you give an order, such as take cover, the commandos religiously stick to this order. Usually, I found myself constantly putting a lad in a spot, watching his back, getting distracted, then realizing he was still hunkered down, getting mauled by the enemy. I had moved on without him entirely, and he just maintained orders. With this, you need to remember to cancel your orders, to look at your teammates and unshackle them from the responsibility you placed on them. Otherwise, they'll remain in a spot for far too long. At first, I thought this was an annoying feature, yet as the game progressed, I realized just how exciting it made the moment-to-moment gameplay, flicking between targets to shoot and friendlies to command. When at its peak, it gives the game a fluidity that basic shooting wouldn't be able to provide. The only actual downside is just how cluttered the screen can get when displaying its full potential. A battlefield riddled with icons of cover, turrets, mines, and objectives can start to resemble a screenshot of Suicide Squad, with just how little you can actually see of the gameplay. With this being an older game meant to be displayed on much smaller screens, these icons aren't exactly subtle. Sometimes they take up the majority of the screen when you're close enough. More than once I tried to target an enemy, focusing the team's fire, only to accidentally send a soldier to a useless spot next to the enemy. Precisely targeting the thing that you want becomes far more difficult than it should be when you're in a room full of both options and opponents, which becomes an even bigger problem when the gray enemies begin to blend into the gray environments. As a guy who likes his games as uncluttered as possible, I sometimes struggle to tell what's happening in a given moment of gameplay. Sometimes that's exciting, sometimes it's frustrating, which isn't the best blend for your main gimmick of gameplay. And soldier, that's with me turning my tactical visor off. With it on, there's even more nonsense on screen. The context-sensitive objectives range from stressful to simple. The timers occasionally vary in length. As you adapt to the changes, you will begin to recognize when and where each is stronger suited. But let's pause. Did you notice that I, at no point, implied the existence of a mechanic to choose which trooper does what? That is because, in execution, no one member of the team can be specifically selected. You do not get a say in which one commits to the task. The game just picks the closest, or most readily available, and its choices are never all that questionable. If someone isn't committed to an order, they are free to commit to the latest one. Simple enough. Had the option to be more specific been present in this game, I imagine I would find myself too often overwhelmed with the decision-making process. By simplifying the core mechanics of the game, it quickens the pace and leads to an easier gameplay loop, both to its extreme benefit and its unfortunate detriment. Republic Commando inevitably suffers from the simplicity in a way that isn't massive, but is still mildly heartbreaking. First of all, there's the commandos themselves. All that class and characterization the game went through to give these clones some personality begins to go to a slight waste. Scorch loving explosions means very little if everyone is capable of setting the charge and only you can pull the trigger. Sev being our sniper isn't of any relevance at all because everyone can be our sniper if the context provides. Fixer can punch a terminal and get us into a room, but not any more efficient than the next guy. It takes a lot of the established work that went in to make them feel unique and waters it down for the sake of gameplay. In the original draft of this game, where the commandos were more nameless and without personality, this would have been effective, watching a team of equals tear through multiple tasks with efficiency. And yes, that probably would have been way more boring. But in the final product, it feels sadly reductive to the specialness of these characters. Again, I don't inherently disagree with this decision, it just bums me out when I analyze it for more than a second. Furthermore, there is one last detail to add about these contextual actions. You yourself can perform these stunts that you'd send a commando to do. Think it'd be better if you were the one planting the detonation charge while the boys defend? Go for it. You want a moment on the laser turret? Hog it as long as you'd like. This really adds a spice to the variety of Republic Commando's gameplay. Had it just been an entire campaign where you bark orders and shoot your gun, standing back and looking pretty, I don't know that I would have complained, like it just would have been expected. Instead, being able to perform these actions makes the gameplay loop feel more personal, self-expression on the part of the player, given multiple options and allowing them to handle it in any way they see fit. On top of that, if I allow myself the immersion, this final option brings me closer to the squad, as if I'm putting my neck on the line just as they do for me. It makes you believe these guys got your back a lot more when you literally expose your back and they defend your person somewhere just off screen. Republic Commando's squad-focused gameplay does find itself awkwardly highlighted during lengthy sections of the game that ask you to go solo. The group splits up, adding an unexpected tension to the gameplay. The levels are lonelier and feeling more difficult in gameplay. When all of the enemy's focus is on just yourself, it can get easily overwhelming. That being said, with the power of the PC and quick saves, this ends up feeling more like a Doom-esque challenge. Sprinting into certain death, staying light on your feet, and swapping between the many weapons in your arsenal becomes an exhilarating part of the gameplay loop. Yet, if you are put into a position where you must be far more restrictive with your saves, relying on the game's checkpoint systems, you'd likely get frustrated by the repetitive deaths. There is an enjoyment that comes from a rapid challenge in and out in an instance, failure met with immediate retry. However, this game's checkpoints are often put at distance from the fight, and before you even make it to the real slaughterfest, you gotta grind through a few unnotable grunts or stand in front of a 10-second button prompt.
Time to make a little mess of my own.
And that is not an exaggeration. As I mentioned a moment ago, in Republic Commando, most any objective you could give your squad mates is an action that you could complete yourself. To strike a proper balance, the game treats these actions equally regardless of who is doing them. No one plants a bomb faster, no one slams their hand on a screen better. This adds to a given experience when you're asking your fellow soldiers to take up a task while you defend. Buy them some time, give the player a taste of realism. However, that same amount of time applies if you're the one holding down the fort, pressing and holding the button until the prompt disappears. While this can lead to some cool moments of tension where you need to mentally balance when it's time to shoot and when it's time to push a button, the same can't be said for when it's just you, alone. No enemies. No pressure, no teammates, just you staring at a timer as it ticks down. These moments are too brief to ruin an experience, too inconsequential to lose the game any points. I mention it only because, like I said, pairing it with an inconsistent checkpoint system can start to reveal some frustrations a player might form with this type of game. Thankfully, Republic Commando is aware that its main bread and butter relies on Delta Squad, and so these solo missions aren't too common, usually serving a reasonably exciting purpose narratively. The squad as a whole feels like an important pillar of this game. They are highlighted appropriately as the stars of Republic Commando. Done so in a way that doesn't necessarily give you the impression that you're the big hero, but that together, Delta Squad are the Rippers and the Terrors. But there's a flavor in the air, something about Republic Commando that sets it apart from everything else in all of Star Wars canon. There's something else that makes this game one of a kind, never to be replicated again. A flavor I've not tasted since...
Sir? Since when, sir? Sir, since when? Since when?
Out of the many games that spawned upon the emergence of clones, none fascinated me more than the ever-distant Republic Commando. During a time where the original Xbox had a certain Mountain Dew-flavored grime to its reputation, Republic Commando felt like a gritty take on not just the family-friendly Star Wars story, but also the newly blossoming Clone Wars saga. Unfortunately for me, being locked away on the Xbox and PC made it feel inescapably inconceivable to my young mind. I did not own an Xbox. I had only met one person in all my life that had one. My family computer, on the other hand, contained a few games, but the idea of playing something as complex as Halo had just never even occurred to me. Far off in the distance, I would watch trailers, look for segments of gameplay online, fiend over the concept art. In a far less saturated version of the internet, this game felt like a secret, a world in which I could look through the window and peer into, but never step foot in. And I mean, just look at this game. How could a young lad in 2005 say no to something so tantalizing? This isn't your granny's Star Wars. This is that new, loud, in-your-face Limp Bizkit type of Star Wars. Republic Commando is so over the top in its admiration for the butt-rock stylings that were popular at the time. So much so that the extras section includes a music video that feels like the exact type of thing I'd find on early 2000s YouTube. The difference being that usually this would be a fan-made thing, but no, here it is, an official part of this game. That being said, let's not get it twisted. This music video is in no way out of place. Republic Commando is butt rock. The concept art displays clone troopers hitting poses you'd plaster on a propaganda poster, looking cool, going hard. I guarantee you that these images are what really suckered in a young fellow like myself, not just enticing me to look into this game, but to delve deeper into Star Wars overall. I'm sure many of us fall into this camp, but for me,
The clones have always been the main redeeming factor of the prequels.
my infatuation with the armor-clad lads can be traced back to this game and its effects on clone culture going forward. This game's intense concept work paired with Genndy Tartakovsky's Clone Wars definitely formed the backbone of how I wanted to view Star Wars for the majority of my youth. Keep your space wizards. For a young hare, Star Wars was about these dudes blowing up droids and looking sick doing it. The clones of Republic Commando are certainly a large degree grittier than I've personally ever seen them depicted. While I think there's definitely going to be some folks to lobby complaints towards this approach, I think it does nothing but enhance the game's overall personality. In an alternate universe where this game didn't release until after the Disney buyout, maybe we would have gotten a more competent or refined game. But without that unique sense of style, would it have really become the classic that it's considered today?
Answer, no.
I think the grit and grounded take on our beloved Star Wars universe is important to sprinkle in every now and then. When one tale in the long timeline of Star Wars shines in a particular way, that makes it stand out. I could understand if the finished product doesn't feel Star Wars, but even then, what do we have to lose from going wild and experimenting? Disney's Star Wars, no matter how funky it gets, still holds on to this piece of brand identity that it refuses to let go.
You're still holding on! Let go!
Here, in 2005, it was much more of a Wild West. There was freedom to experiment, freedom that LucasArts developers took extreme advantage of. Well, they did this time around. With the Clone Wars still finding its identity in the wide world of Star Wars canon, Republic Commando swooped in and helped in setting the tone. And that tone is your dad's favorite burn CD of butt rock. Our protagonist Delta 3-8 spots a discarded lightsaber and looks at it, quoting old Ben Kenobi from the original trilogy with,
An elegant weapon for a more civilized time, huh? Well, guess what? Times have changed.
This ain't your granny Star Wars.
In the early game, clones and droids fight in their usual status quo type of way. Explosions, fallen soldiers, droids popping apart like action figures. As the game progresses, elements of horror start to creep in. First with Geonosians crawling out of their bug-hole layers, intentionally giving a player the heebie-jeebies. Yet as we progress, the graphic nature of war begins to slip further through the cracks. Trandoshans commandeer a Republic cruiser, leaving a bloodbath in their wake. And I don't just mean the occasional bloodstain here or there. We're talking de-limbed clones littering the hallways, and a trash compactor filled with corpses. The super serious grit escalates the further into this level you go. By putting the typically confident clones on the back foot, we ground the campy world of Star Wars deep in a more war-torn reality. Just on paper, this is a 2000 boys' dream game. In execution, well, it's probably even more wish fulfillment than you'd expect. On Kashyyyk, you might expect a Star Wars game to introduce the Wookiees in a way that that keeps them lovable and playful, but no, we're at war. It's time to go buck wild. Trandoshans tried to capture them as slaves. That's awful. The Wookiees are fighting back with extreme, violent prejudice. That's metal.
That's BUTTROCK.
We assist the Wookiees, fighting off the Trandoshans through war-torn Kashyyyk, fighting in the ever-pouring rain, blowing up everything in sight, and even using our fallen Wookiee brethren's corpses as cover.
This ain't your granny, Star Wars.
I know you might be thinking I'm laying this out to sort of laugh and poke fun, but like, no, man. What happened to us as a society? When did we lose this? Where did it go? Bring back my BUTTROCK. Times have definitely changed. Star Wars is still attempting every year to locate an identity that it once had and has consistently let go of. We, in terms of mainstream culture, have settled into a much cleaner groove for the time being. So, when I look at Republic Commando and get hit with the overwhelming reminder of a time long past, it doesn't hit with a kind of embarrassment, it hits with a nostalgic pride. On top of that, I think BUTTROCK vibes in this game just marry together perfectly. Playing this game and being hit with the smell of Mountain Dew didn't make the experience feel ancient, it made it feel natural. The game was clearly crafted by a team of talented people who all sort of had a similar vision and were eager to line their version of Star Wars up alongside the running canon. And while on paper it absolutely should not have worked, it did immensely well. Republic Commando never stops feeling like anything other than Star Wars. Its gritty bad butt stylings only give it the ability to both stand out as well as stand the test of time. Thus why even now, 20 years later, I'm still sitting here, playing it for the first time and walking away with an immense sense of pleasure and respect. But seriously, we gotta get back to this feeling as a people. Now, Republic Commando being created during a time of Wild West discovery of Star Wars' identity did result in a lot of good, but it does create some retrospective oddities. If you're used to the average modern-day depiction of clone troopers, I'm gonna ask that you set that familiarity to the side for now. While we knew what clone troopers looked and sounded like by the time this game came around, the concept of keeping them almost completely identical must have been fearsome at first. Maybe it's for this reason that our protagonist, Delta 38, is the only one who sounds like an actual clone trooper. I'm not just referring to the rest of the squad when I say he's the only one. I mean when compared to all of the random unnamed clones, 38 is the only one that sounds like Jango Fett. Occasionally, you will bump shoulders with troopers outside of your squad. While most of them weren't too jarring to my modern understanding of the way a clone trooper sounds, one of them in the Republic cruiser did really bother me. We land on the cruiser alone. The ship is barren, empty, almost completely still. We are contextually here to investigate why the ship has gone dark in the first place, why we haven't heard from anyone. After walking around for a few minutes of nothingness, a clone steps out across the way. He gives a lame excuse for where he was, how he avoided an ill fate. He's not even clear what's going on, so it seems. But the entire situation plays out so strangely that I was convinced the game was about to tell a story most unexpected. His dialogue is weird, stilted, worrisome.
I was, scanning the maintenance corridors.
His voice, being so distant from a clone trooper's usual soundings, convinced me he was going to lure us in and attack us from behind. The old dress-up routine from the original films. It seemed fitting, interesting even. Like, wow, are we about to have a fight with enemies dressed as clones? Or is this maybe a moment that lowers a player's sense of security, heightening the tension further? Maybe we'd bump into our squad and find they're acting differently. After all, moments before this encounter, we will hear one of our squad mates go silent, seemingly rendered unconscious. But no, the game doesn't pull this trick. It doesn't go anywhere near that scenario I dreamed up. The guy actually was just hiding or napping away somewhere, and then he gets attacked by an enemy that we'll face in the next several rooms. It was just this strange moment of disconnect where being familiar with modern Star Wars and hearing a clone speak without his New Zealand bounty hunter tongue caused my brain to doubt his validity. For the record, I don't blame this game. I'm not attempting to criticize these voice actors. I'm merely just highlighting one of a few moments where this game managed to slip out from underneath the Star Wars norm, and I found it more jarring than appealing. Whether that's a result of being an early entry in the Clone Wars, or just some strange decision on the development side, I can't tell. What I consciously do know is why the squad were made to sound different from each other. Like I said before, George Lucas himself saw the project and how it was going, and gave the advice that each of the clones be given a name and more distinct personality. Mr. Lucas has a shaky track record for giving advice to LucasArts developers, but this one is definitely a a stroke of good fortune. With this game releasing not long after clones had been introduced, I would have imagined that Lucasfilms and LucasArts would have been far more cautious with their depictions of the troopers. Like, if the world is just now being shown that they're dealing with an army of cloned individuals, then you probably don't want to hit them with clones that have their own distinct personalities until after they've gotten used to them being mostly the same person, you know? However, despite my initial trepidation, Republic Commando could not have been what it is without the uniqueness of these clones. Their names, their personalities, and everything that makes them unique draws a player closer to them as companions. After the initial lack of familiarity wears off, we grow to enjoy the new voice cast. Those of us still grumpy over the decision are extended the olive branch by letting us take control of the commando that sounds like a clone trooper original. Hilariously though, I think you can still detect a hint that the game hadn't planned on having 4 separate voice actors for Delta Squad. The commandos drop lines that would sound a lot more natural with a New Zealand accent rather than their average American ones. But rather than annoying me, this often gave me a smirk. Like, I could easily justify that clone culture leads to them speaking similarly, even if their voices don't sound alike. And that's kind of the beauty of a project like this. It's easy to work out how it fits into the wider world of Star Wars. It's so nice and contained while occasionally tapping into what we know. That does mean that I laughed when they name-dropped the Wookiee Tarfful as our VIP.
Goodbye, Tarfful.
But it also goes to show how sometimes a sprinkle of love on something new can make it taste all too familiar. No break in the canon, however, could lead to a larger disconnect in Republic Commando than this game's fairly consistent bugs. And not the Geonosis variety, mind you. Though they were some of the most finicky villains to fight. They climb and clamber over ledges only to emerge several feet too far. They hover with and without wings. A couple of times I hit a reset button because an objective timer completely stopped working. Other times I watched as a trooper walked up to an objective and stood there doing nothing. A waste of valuable time. And with a game that does not give ammo abundantly, time is ammo. Ammo is life. A waste of any bullets is a guaranteed headache. The game functions as intended with the way your teammates and enemies react to each other, yet sometimes it's frustrating to watch. Sending a trooper to do a mission while a super battle droid stands in the way means they're gonna walk up and get into a drunken barroom fistfight until one of them drops dead. Similarly, the commandos are smart enough to crouch when crossing your line of fire, except for the dozens of times where they don't. Every level is progressed when you walk into blue arrow markers, but for whatever reason, the commandos have a speaking line just before you exit several of these levels. For the first chunk of my playthrough, these voice lines were completely skipped because I saw a finish line and started rushing towards it. Then, almost as if to mock me, the next time I stopped right before progressing, and the team remained completely silent. Opposite to that, there were several moments of overlapping audio. We had examples of 3-8 talking over the clone advisor who gives us directions. Other times, Temura Morrison was talking over himself, doubling up on voice lines, leaving me completely stun-locked and unclear of what was happening.
Abandon position resistance.
With nothing to stop the player, blitzing through any zones will cause everyone to eagerly speak over each other. The game is aged, certainly, but that age only gives these moments a certain charm to it. They're kind of vital to the experience's authenticity. If they hadn't been there, I dare say that my experience would have been far less remarkable. There is a certain level of beauty to conquering a game despite it fighting you along the way, and Republic Commando lives, dies, and thrives in that department. Graphically, Republic Commando has a layer of dirt and grime to it that was somewhat common with games of the era. Yet, more than some, the filtered effect feels married to the atmosphere, especially on a rock and sand planet like Geonosis. Republic Commando's browns and grays have this extra addition that amplifies the gritty realism the game attempts to go for. Enemies, too, have this extra level of shadowy fearsomeness. In no game have droids ever been taken all that serious, but here, in the darkness, they do begin to contain a level of foreboding, which only escalates with each of the threats that appear throughout the campaign. Being a game from the Xbox era, the game's models are rigid and polygonal. In no way poorly done. On the contrary, it's rather stunning what the LucasArts teams managed to pull off with the era's limitations. The characters are perfectly indicative of their movie counterparts. Commandos especially looking, moving, and behaving convincingly. More than convincingly, I'd say. They go above and beyond with their animations, making you feel like they're far more real than just a series of shapes trapped within the confines of this game. game. While I've never been crazy with the odd, oversized nature of their helmets, this new look for the Commandos does give them more intimidation. And while that would feel out of place in another Star Wars experience, in this game, their design grounds them in a world that matches the tone. Environments in an average first-person shooter are typically not that complicated, each being a series of hallways, rooms, and open spaces. Republic Commandos are special in the way that they are always convincing. Areas look identical to their movie inspirations, and more than that, there was a clear intention in making some areas have inner workings. Pipes that run across, sometimes in the way of combat. Mechanisms with purpose outside of our struggle, now creating the playground on which we do battle. Areas that are given purpose other than just being level fodder. Things that imply a deeper story outside of our own. My personal favorite being a crashed clone dropship with a still operating turret. Though small, the details that make up a world are what will inevitably construct its final image. And the work that was put into this game leaves me with an impression that the world has stories beyond my inclusion in it, at least as well of an impression as a 2005 game can leave. I don't want to continue knocking this game for being old. In fact, I think I only do that as a sort of defense against the potential criticisms one might throw at it. In my eyes, games have mostly aged well, especially games as intimately crafted as this one. For this reason, I'm sure plenty could gaze upon these brown and gray video clips and feel unenthused. Yet, I find myself constantly impressed with how quickly my immersion can spark up, especially when creeping through the more dreadful zones. Though, for that matter, I think the heavy lifting of immersion has very little to do with the visuals. In the extras, there's a video package for the Foley artistry of this game, and boy, is it fascinating. Foley is the post-production sound work used to enhance the more mundane sounds that would probably go unnoticed. Without them, a game would feel incomplete. Typically, Foley work is used as the descriptive word for the subtle sound design in filmmaking. Thankfully, games have smartly adopted these more subtle sound effects, and I think it's actually important for me to hone in on this aspect, as they really are exceptional in Republic Commando.
Woo-hoo! Eat plasma!
They're in the trench! Pull back together, Victor! Pull back!
Star Wars as a franchise is all about sound design. What makes the blaster fire iconic is the way it sounds. What keeps the TIE fighters memorable is their shrieking engines. The greatest part of pod racing is the way the engine hums and violently warbles. I don't even need to play the sound effects, you likely can already hear them in your mind. There is possibly nothing that I love more than the sounds of Star Wars. So naturally, when you pull up a game with that iconic yellow logo on the box, it too will be submitted to my ear's judgment. By pointing out the Foley aspects of Republic Commando, I do find myself paying much closer attention to the smaller sounds. The weighty clumps of clone armor shifting, the crunches of droids as they fall apart, the pitter-patter and splats of feet. Though, admittedly, a lot of this more subtle work fades into the background of the sheer chaos that each battle contains. Blaster fire explosions, bombastic John Williams tracks. That's the main impact the game leaves on a player. But when the pace slows down and we are left to stew in its atmosphere, it can easily captivate me. On Geonosis, ships fly overhead, whooshing past somewhere just out of view. In the droid factory, the occasional hisses and clanks of machinery can set off some worried paranoia. On board the hostage Republic cruiser, we can hear the massive structure creak and groan. Distant sounds echo through the lifeless halls. When stomping across the wooden structures of Kashyyyk, I was shocked by the sounds given by my own weighty footsteps. I stopped abruptly just to ensure that it was caused by my own inputs and not some background ambience. As butt-rock and crazy as the game can get, it never stops being remarkably convincing, authentic to the Star Wars experience in that way. Every reload, every blaster shot, every small movement, every big set piece, managing to convince adult me in a way that would have certainly consumed childhood me. If you're a constant connoisseur of Star Wars video games, then you would know that averagely, the soundtracks consist of one constant: the well-known and beloved John Williams' scores. Bombastic, loud, iconic, you're undoubtedly familiar with them. The bad news is that Republic Commando falls victim to the same problem all these other games do. It can't help but to use a few of these songs in all of their glory. And really, can you blame them? The quickest shortcut to making something feel Star Wars is to just overlay the soundtrack on top of it. Despite John Williams' historic career, the scores that he made for Star Wars have a distinct and identifiable sound to them. Trying to match or emulate such masterpieces is a recipe for embarrassment. Having a Star Wars experience without them is asking for disappointment. So, when a game chooses to include them, I don't blame it. But I have played enough of these to know, when you hear it all the time, every day, in multiple games released across many years, well, it's still good, but I mean, come on, too much of a good thing, you know? Thankfully, Republic Commando commits to a path less traveled. Battle sequences are scored with the typical John Williams whimsy, yet the in-betweens are not only original tracks, they're unique. I've primed you to probably expect this game to go a BUTTROCK route with its original music. As much as I'd love for that to be our reality, I'm very happy with what we got instead, and what we got is most unexpected. Republic Commando accompanies most of its in-game moments with two recurring sounds: deep, almost Celtic vocal choruses and drums. Lots and lots of drums. The percussion can come in the form of a deep bass for the more haunting moments, or it can sound off with a snare, beating in the rhythm of a military march for its more exciting scenes. I'm not even a big music guy and like, guys, this game has a didgeridoo. Is that as huge of a deal to you as it is to me? From what I can tell, Republic Commando seemed to break new ground in terms of Star Wars standards. Composer Jesse Harlan wanted this dark and gritty world to be filled with music to match.
In order to find this sound, he went above and beyond. He created an ancient Mandalorian language to back our troopers' adventures, giving their actions this sense of ancient honor and unfortunate duty. The music reaches into the very blood of the guy the clones were made from and extracts the sounds of a warrior.
Let me lean closer there.
Jesse Harlan created the basis of what would eventually become Mandoa, here in Republic Commando, for the music. It's difficult to remember a time before Mandalorians were introduced to the Star Wars canon, but the fact that this game is the genesis of their language blows my mind. And it goes to show just how impressive the work behind the scenes can be when you put freedom in the hands of an extremely capable and talented artist and let them go as nuts as they desire. I think the influence of this soundtrack has some shocking ripples throughout Star Wars that we may not be able to fully calculate. By weaving the John Williams bits in with the new and fresh takes, Republic Commando finds itself fitting in so naturally with everything else Star Wars, while also remaining so immensely unique. So thank you, Mr. Harlan, for somehow getting the didgeridoo into Star Wars. Kashyyyk's levels are much shorter, chopped into tight chunks. The time between each loading screen is aggressively minute. Despite this, Kashyyyk overall is maybe more than half of this game's playtime. The final mission stretches from the ground floor to the planet's treetops, fighting off slavers, then separatist invaders, and even reintroducing Geonosians in an all-star everyone is here type of battle. The battles become almost numbing in a way, routine. Difficult, certainly, but still routine. You bounce from one to another, the odds constantly stacked against you. One beautiful moment even gets you with the only twist of mechanics in the whole game. An important detonation charge is a dud.
A dud!
Now to blow the bridge, you gotta do it with a less civilized approach. Kashyyyk, despite everything I've said, does shake the foundations of this game a couple of times. We meet Tarfful, a character mentioned once in Revenge of the Sith.
Goodbye, Tarfful.
Just before the credits, we will see a hologram of Jedi Master Yoda. Somewhere in between those, we get a tantalizing taste of the new character, General Grievous. Were I a young lad and this was my first taste of the Metal Man thing, I could imagine being obsessed. He is strange, mysterious, and kept at a loving distance. It's a beautiful cameo as well as a beautiful excuse to drop one last frustrating enemy type onto us, Grievous's bodyguards. The bodyguards fly and flip across the screen, barreling towards the commandos and overwhelming them with a flurry of blows. As soon as they appear, ducking into cover is pointless, and most strategies are rendered null. It's a wake-up call for anyone nodding off at the controller. If you're genuinely paying attention to what's happening in terms of the plot, it's really neat to watch how they weave the appearance of Grievous in. It signals a confirmation of the character's fears, taking the conflict from being a rescue to being a full-scale invasion repellent that will have ripples into the next film. As one final change to the formula, the game poses one final mission. A separatist ship has parked its fat rear overhead, and with Wookiee artillery, we can take it down. The catch is that there are 4 cannons, each a distance from each other, only with the power of all 4 cannons can we eliminate the threat. So, the players must navigate through an onslaught of enemies to reach each cannon, and every time you do, you are giving up one of your commandos, ensuring that the next journey is going to be all the more difficult. A smile crept on my face as soon as I realized what was happening. I thought this would be the perfect place to take our story, to show just how vital your crew has been by slowly ripping them out of your control. It felt beautifully cruel. But then, I just beat it. It wasn't even the hardest part of the game for me. I dropped my lads off one by one, gave them a pat on the head, and moved on, which did not properly prepare me for how this game ends. After destroying the ship, I had honestly imagined we were all about to meet some kind of appropriate demise, shades of Halo Reach playing in my mind. Instead, the gang reconvene, all except Sev, who lets out one final transmission that strikes the worst fears in Delta Squad.
Boss, I've got a problem here.
Sev, where are you?
Multiple
They're commanded to get out of there, but the squad argue against these orders. They gotta go back for Sev. I was gleefully shocked. Where was this going? Are our lads about to turn their backs on the Republic for the sake of their missing family member? Was the potential sequel bait going to be the implication of a rogue squadron of commandos facing against the clones? Maybe the commandos are immune to Order 66, built different. So, when the clones turn villainous, the commandos are justified in their ruthless necessity for survival. Or maybe we go ahead and close the story now. The team turn around and go to get Sev, finding him and putting up one final fight together, dying but refusing to die alone and without a fight. I had a lot of ideas, and none of them really matter, because the team pulls out, as ordered, and witnesses a much fuller might of the Republic as they begin to properly repel the Separatist invaders. Yoda even gives us a call to imply there's more adventure that lay ahead, and then the game just ends. Cue the BUTTROCK credits. The ending is abrupt, a quick goodbye when the conversation isn't even over. While I have no possible evidence to prove myself correct, it does feel like a result of development running out of time, a quick stumble at the finish line. You made it, but not quite the way you had expected. It sets up a potential sequel, yes, but it also gives no conclusion to our story as is, to the point that it feels like they had to wrap up what they had and present it as finished even if it wasn't.
Which would explain why the last few sections are just repeats of the same fights continuously.
On the one hand, I get it. That's the nature of the beast, especially with this game releasing in a terribly tight window, only months before Revenge of the Sith. The pressure was probably more than the development schedule could bear. So no rewrites, no 5th draft, no extra additions, just put a cap on it, put it out there. The only evidence I've personally found to help push my interpretation of why the ending is so jarring is a few articles and reviews that state a shift in power at Lucasfilms. This helped ensure that Battlefront 2 got the much better end of the deal, and Republic Commando got very little assistance or love from higher ups. Which is enough for me to say that maybe I'm onto something, maybe not. Either way, the ending we got isn't the most satisfying, but it certainly does explain why this game has always had a feverish cult fanaticism behind it. I have heard cries for a sequel for ages, and only now do I realize how vital a sequel would be to the story it's trying to tell. Softly, I'd like to combat anyone who sees this ending and feels satisfaction from it, because you deserve better, and this ending just feels so hollow. I know it sounds like I rushed through what happens, but the actual moment-to-moment nature of the ending truly isn't all that easier to digest. I can understand why our characters would feel they're obligated to follow orders and leave Sev behind. It does make sense in terms of motivations, but it doesn't make sense in terms of writing a story. The characters leaving without one of their members causes the entire journey to be rendered kinda pointless. Our team was put through a predicament where they fought hard and overcame the obstacles, then got to the end, learning nothing, needing nothing, and wanting nothing more than what they've always had. Nothing was gained, something was lost. And while there's definitely a way to write that ending, Republic Commando doesn't feel like it was ever attempting to tell that story. But maybe that's the problem. I'm approaching this as if it's a story, when in reality, it's a game. The player isn't here for a narrative that makes sense and wraps itself up neatly. They're here to blow some stuff up and look cool doing it. Who cares how it ends? Did I enjoy the journey? Yes, I did. Oh yes, by the way, every discussion of this game is incomplete if we don't mention that Delta Squad did get to continue their story here and there through novelization. In addition, we got to see them a couple times in the animated form, which, to me, is the sweetest of icings on top.
In the time before the prequels, LucasArts existed as a company that made extremely high-quality games, rarely leaning on their Star Wars IP. This meant that the Star Wars games that were made by LucasArts focused on original stories and characters, rarely leaning on established norms. As the prequel films crept up, LucasArts was put into overdrive on video game tie-ins, resulting in the cascade of games we got over the years. I'm not really complaining all that much. A lot of these games stand out as formative experiences for a lot of us. LucasArts took to making as many games spanning over as many genres as possible. It should be pointed out that, for the most part, they were extremely successful at this. A racing game wasn't simple and cheap, it was surprisingly engaging. The real-time strategy game wasn't bare bones, it was exceedingly competent. Despite the uphill battle, LucasArts met the challenge. That takes an immense amount of knowledge and talent. The downside to all of this only becomes evident when you look at the content of the games in regards to their subject matter. These prequel-era games focus on moments pulled straight from the films. Sometimes it's a little flexible with its story, sometimes it's depressingly rigid. Regardless, while production went up, creativity took a bit of a nosedive. The point that I want to make is in regards to my largest criticism of Star Wars overall. In the many years of the series' existence, we have had countless creatives take advantage of its endless expanse. Star Wars, as a setting, is near infinite in its possibilities. So long as you're operating in the general field that the original films established, you could easily tell any story you'd like to. And yet, Star Wars, as we know it in the modern sense, is a series of recycled thoughts, characters, settings, and themes that have endlessly looped back in on themselves in what is probably the most uninteresting way possible. No matter where we go, we keep ending up right back where it started. The entire galaxy revolves around a single family, which, even if it were true, doesn't make it very interesting. Star Wars is mostly beloved for its sense of adventure. The idea that this galaxy is so far beyond ours, filled with alien people that interact in ways very different, yet familiar at their core. The Force is cool, absolutely. Lightsabers are rad, unquestionably, but the more we see it, the less special it becomes. Not to mention, the entire world outside of those concepts is so massive, and yet you wouldn't know it by looking at the films because we'd never exist far enough away from these common elements. Even when something new comes along and surprises you with its competency and bravery, it still feels the need to dangle familiar characters in your face like jangling keys to keep a child's attention, as if it's scared that you'll question its legitimacy. Republic Commando strikes an amazing middle ground that I respect immensely. Its story and characters far remove us from Jedi, the Force, and its usual heroics. It places us on planets and locations that are familiar, or will be familiar in the series overall. However, at no point do you bump into the big shots, unless you count Tarfful as a big shot.
Goodbye, Tarfful.
The story doesn't rely on everything the films establish. It takes these elements and remixes them to make something standalone and unique. Republic Commando is flavored with a bit of BUTTROCK, but name another Star Wars project that feels like this one. This game has managed to capture a part of the Star Wars universe that we haven't seen up to this point. It lightly answers the hypothetical question of what does this world look like from the nameless soldier's perspective. You shoot guns and throw grenades, you fight enemies, old and new. You get an insight into this world that is fresh and unknowable, unexplored in the films. To me, that's what Star Wars games should capture the most. The parts of this world we don't get to see. Republic Commando is gritty and grounded, adding a layer of horror and powerlessness, but it uses and remixes enough Star Wars assets to feel like it fits right into its continuity. Not just fit into it, but expand it. While LucasArts could have remained satisfied with recycling a playable experience of the films, they added something more. Republic Commando is one experience of many that cultivated clone trooper culture in the Star Wars universe. And speaking as a guy who became fairly obsessed with that side of the franchise, we have a lot to thank this game for. Republic Commando shouldn't just be praised for its retroactive significance though. We're talking about a pretty decent game, short, digestible, begging to form some unforgettable memories in a child's mind. It's a recognizably unique game, and a contained experience in a timeline bloated by safe and same. We all beg for a sequel.
Still, we wish this game could have done gangbusters and go on to be a true Halo killer, but that wishing discounts what sits right in front of us. Beauty, perfection, genuity. The video game Republic Commando is a shoot-bang fiesta that somehow manages to squeeze a large amount of creativity and uniqueness out of one of the most tired genres in gaming. At the time of its release, it was competent. Critics either nodded along or they had some sort of stink to throw its way. And truthfully, a lot of these viewpoints aren't exactly wrong. Could it use some more polish? Yes. Is it a bit simplistic? Yes. Would it be better if it had lightsabers or the Force? No! But in 2025, Republic Commando is nearly perfect. It's buggy in just the right places, with just the right balance of meat-headed thoughtlessness and panicked contemplation. It's a time capsule of an era we left behind, and it feeds my soul to be able to return to that place in all of its good and its bad. Republic Commando is bold-faced and proud of itself in a way that games should be. It didn't move the needle, but it lived on despite that. Fans still play it to this day. Newcomers still give it a shot in our modern times. Republic Commando isn't a game for the millions. It's a game for the passionate few. It's a secret between a small subsect of Star Wars fans. I find a mild pride in finally having experienced this game and being let in on that secret. And within that pride, I found a passion for something I thought that I had missed. A game I knew I'd love, but was still shocked to find how easily I took to it. Republic Commando is simple, beautiful, tragic, and a full embodiment of the landscape it was made in. And it is but one small example of what goodness there is to find in the sea of Star Wars content, despite what modern circumstances would have us believe. You should play it. Star Wars good. That's what I'm saying. Jeez, okay, I'm leaving. Alright, I'm done. Goodbye, good night.
May the Force be with you. Be excellent to each other.